In 2009, archaeologist Loren Davis stood on a narrow river terrace along the Salmon River in western Idaho, holding a stone artifact that should not have existed. The stemmed projectile point in his hand was buried beneath a layer containing Clovis tools, the supposed first technology in the Americas. But this point was different. It had no flute. It represented an entirely separate tradition. And when the radiocarbon dates came back, they revealed something that would force archaeologists to rewrite the story of how humans first reached North America. The site is called Cooper's Ferry. For the Nez Perce people, this location has always been known as Niphey, an ancient village site preserved in their oral histories. For generations, archaeology treated these stories as myths, tales without substance. The excavation at Cooper's Ferry would prove that indigenous memory extends deeper than the pyramids, deeper than the Ice Age, deeper than anyone in academia thought possible. Davis's team from Oregon State University began their systematic excavation in 2009, carefully removing soil layer by layer from the terrace overlooking the confluence of the Salmon and Snake rivers. In the upper deposits, they found exactly what they expected: Clovis projectile points, those distinctive fluted spear tips with their characteristic channel flakes removed from both faces. Radiocarbon dates confirm these artifacts were around 13,000 years old. The textbook story held, but then they dug deeper. Below the Clovis horizon, separated by a clear change in sediment, another cultural layer appeared. The fluted points disappeared. In their place, stemmed projectile points, tools with sharp tips and carefully shaped stems at the base for hafting onto wooden shafts. This was not Clovis technology. This was something older, something that predated what was supposed to be the beginning. The first major discovery was Hearth 129. Not a natural burn, a deliberately constructed fire feature. A circular pit dug into the earth, approximately 1 meter across, lined with fire-cracked rocks heated and cooled repeatedly. Inside, charcoal. The carbonized remains of wood burned by human hands thousands of years ago. Surrounding the hearth, dozens of stone tools and hundreds of pieces of lithic debris, the razor-sharp flakes that scatter when master craftsmen work stone. This was not a temporary campsite. This was a processing station where people lived, worked, and prepared food over extended periods. Davis collected charcoal from Hearth 129 and sent it to radiocarbon dating laboratories. The results shattered everything archaeologists thought they knew. The dates ranged between 15,000 and 16,000 years before present. It is important to note that before present, abbreviated BP, is calibrated against the year 1950, when extensive radiocarbon dating began. Before we go further, if the idea that DNA remembers what history forgot gives you chills, tap subscribe and stay with Lost Evidence for more ancient mysteries decoded by DNA. And if you're as fascinated by this genetic legacy as we are, hit like. It helps bring these stories to more people who still carry pieces of this ancient past in their DNA. And tell us in the comments, what part of your own ancestry surprised you the most when you looked deeper? 16,000 years ago, 3,000 years before Clovis even existed. This created a geographical impossibility. 16,000 years ago, the ice-free corridor through Canada did not exist. The Laurentide and Cordilleran ice sheets were at maximum extent, more than a mile thick, creating an impenetrable wall of ice from Alaska to Montana. Even if a narrow gap had opened, recent biological studies show it would have been a lifeless, muddy wasteland, with nothing to sustain travelers. The door was locked. If people were living at Cooper's Ferry 16,000 years ago, they could not have walked there. They arrived by a different route. The team eventually recovered 189 stone artifacts from the pre-Clovis deposits, including 27 complete tools. 13 were stemmed projectile points, along with blades, scrapers, and other implements. But the most telling detail was not what they found. It was how they found it. Many tools were discovered in cultural pits, deliberately excavated holes where people cached high-quality implements for safekeeping and future retrieval. You do not cache valuable gear in a place you visit once. You cache tools where you know you will return. This indicated intimate knowledge of the landscape and repeated occupation over generations. The discovery that would change everything came during excavations in Area B. Between 2012 and 2017, Davis's team uncovered 3 pit features, designated F78, F108, and F151. These were not accidental accumulations. They were formal cultural features, deliberately excavated pits constructed and buried within the lowest cultural deposits. The pits were sealed in sediment, dating to approximately 15,785 calibrated years before present. Inside these 3 features alone, the team recovered 12 complete and fragmentary stem projectile points, a biface fragment, a burin spall, a small fragment of a unidirectional core, and 321 pieces of debitage. A 4th pit, designated PFP1, had been partially destroyed by earlier excavations conducted in the 1960s, obscuring its upper stratigraphic characteristics. But what remained was extraordinary. 14 stemmed points were present. No datable organic samples survived in this disturbed context, but pedogenic calcium carbonate coatings observed on the lower faces of each point told the story. These mineral deposits were identical to those found on points from the undisturbed pits F78 and F108. The calcium carbonate had formed over thousands of years, proving these points had been buried in the same ancient sediment layer before the Rock Creek soil developed at the site around 14,000 years ago. The points themselves ranged from ½ an inch to 2 inches in length. They were smaller than later Clovis points, but no less sophisticated. Each one had been carefully crafted, with a sharp, penetrating tip at one end and a carefully shaped stem at the base for secure hafting to wooden or bone shafts. The manufacturing technique revealed extraordinary skill. The stemmed points provided crucial evidence. They were made from cryptocrystalline silicate, a high-quality stone that fractures like glass, creating edges sharper than surgical steel. This material does not occur at Cooper's Ferry. It had to be sourced from specific geological deposits miles away, proving these people were mobile, organized, and sophisticated enough to seek out the best raw materials. These were not crude experiments. These were bifaces, stone tools worked on both sides to create a thin, symmetrical shape with highly precise cutting edges. The dual production system they employed, combining core and blade techniques with bifacial point manufacture, represented a major technological leap in hunting efficiency. Each strike removed a flake at exactly the right angle. Each percussion created the desired edge geometry. This level of craftsmanship takes generations to develop. The real breakthrough came when Loren Davis and colleague Thomas Jennings examined the manufacturing techniques. The flaking patterns, the core preparation, the method of detaching flakes, all looked remarkably similar to late Upper Paleolithic stone tools from Hokkaido, Japan, dating to approximately 20,000 years ago. But it was not until October 2025 that the full significance became clear. That month, a groundbreaking study appeared in Science Advances titled Characterizing the American Upper Paleolithic. The research team, led by archaeologists David B. Madsen, Loren Davis, Masami Izuho, and Fumiya Izuka, conducted the first comprehensive technological analysis of early American stone tools on a continental scale. The team identified 10 sites located in North America below the limits of the last glacial maximum ice sheets. These sites, spanning from Virginia to New Mexico, from Pennsylvania to Oregon, together form the basis for understanding the nature of American Upper Paleolithic technologies. But of these 10 sites, Only 5 possessed lithic assemblages large enough to adequately characterize their underlying tool production strategies. Cooper's Ferry was one of those 5. The others were Cactus Hill in Virginia, Galt and Friedkin in Texas, Meadowcroft in Pennsylvania, and Paisley Caves in Oregon. Each of these sites contained hundreds to thousands of artifacts that could reveal the technological decisions ancient peoples made when manufacturing tools. The remaining 5 sites, Page Ladson in Florida, Schaefer and Hebior in Wisconsin, and White Sands in New Mexico, provided ancillary support but lacked sufficient artifacts for full technological characterization. This distinction matters. A handful of isolated artifacts cannot reveal a technology. Hundreds of tools showing the full production sequence, from initial core preparation through final retouching, expose the entire decision-making process. They show what kinds of raw materials people preferred, how they tested stone quality, what reduction strategies they employed, how they maintained and resharpened worn tools. The manufacturing debris scattered around Cooper's Ferry hearths preserved these choices in microscopic detail. The dual production system the study documented represents sophisticated technological knowledge passed down through generations. The core and blade technique begins with selecting a high-quality stone nodule and shaping it into a prepared core with a specific striking platform. The toolmaker then detaches long, thin, parallel-sided blades by striking the platform at precise angles with a hammerstone or an antler punch. Each successful strike removes a blade with sharp edges on both sides, a blade that can be used as a cutting tool or further modified into more specialized implements. The bifacial reduction technique involves a different approach. The craftsman takes a large flake or core and removes flakes alternately from both faces, thinning the piece while creating the desired shape. This requires intimate knowledge of how the stone will fracture. Strike too hard and the piece shatters. Strike at the wrong angle and the flake travels too deep, ruining the symmetry. Creating a symmetrical, thin biface with sharp edges along the entire perimeter demands hundreds of carefully controlled percussion blows. The Cooper's Ferry toolmakers mastered both techniques, and they knew when to apply each. They used core and blade production to generate sharp cutting edges efficiently, and bifacial reduction to create projectile points that could penetrate deeply and withstand the impact forces of bringing down large prey. This technological flexibility gave them advantages over groups relying on only one production system. This marked a paradigm shift. Loren Davis stated in the study's press release that for the first time we can say the first Americans belonged to a broader Paleolithic world, one that connects North America to Northeast Asia. The study puts the first Americans back into the global story of the Paleolithic, not as outliers, but as participants in a shared technological legacy. The researchers compared the Cooper's Ferry stemmed points to contemporaneous assemblages from Northeast Asia. The similarities were striking. The nearest and most comparable projectile point forms in Northeast Asia, predating the Cooper's Ferry occupation, dated to 16,000 years ago, were associated with late Upper Paleolithic bifacial point-bearing sites in Hokkaido, Japan. These Japanese sites dated to between 20,000 and 19,000 years ago during the pre-Jomon period. The technological fingerprint was undeniable. Both traditions employed the same dual production system. They used core and blade reduction to create thin, parallel-sided flakes from specially prepared cores. They used bifacial techniques to transform large cores or flakes into desired tool forms. The result was an array of lanceolate and stemmed projectile points that displayed what the study called remarkable morphological and technical continuity between the two regions. These dual late Upper Paleolithic production techniques are common throughout Eurasia, but connecting American points specifically to the Northwest Pacific Rim required examining not just broad similarities, but specific technological characteristics combined with paleogenetic evidence. The convergence was precise. The flaking patterns matched, the hafting strategies matched, and even the size ranges matched. The first Americans at Cooper's Ferry carried stoneworking traditions directly from late Upper Paleolithic populations in Northeast Asia, specifically regions around Japan and the Russian Far East. And since the overland route was blocked by ice, there was only one way they could have reached Idaho: by boat. This confirms the Kelp Highway hypothesis. During the last glacial maximum, while the interior of North America was buried under ice sheets more than 2 miles thick, the Pacific coastline remained open. It was extraordinarily productive. Kelp forests stretched thousands of miles, creating an ecosystem teeming with fish, seals, sea otters, shellfish, and seabirds. For a maritime culture, this was not a barrier, it was a superhighway. Starting around 17,000 years ago, groups moved south along this coastal route from Beringia, the now submerged landmass connecting Siberia and Alaska. They followed the abundance, establishing camps along the shore and pushing farther south with each generation. The Columbia River Basin, where Cooper's Ferry sits at the confluence of the Salmon and Snake, would have been impossible to miss. The Columbia River is the largest river system flowing into the Pacific Ocean from North America. At the end of the last ice age, it drained a massive watershed extending from the Canadian Rockies to the interior plateaus. Salmon runs in the Columbia and its tributaries would have been visible from miles offshore. Schools of fish so dense they darkened the water. Seabirds diving and feeding, clear signals that a major freshwater system lay ahead. For maritime peoples traveling down the coast, major river systems represented highways into the interior. They could paddle upstream, following spawning salmon, exploring new territories while maintaining access to familiar marine resources during seasonal migrations back to the coast. The Columbia offered something more. Its tributaries, including the Snake and Salmon rivers, penetrated deep into the continent, providing access to inland hunting grounds, diverse stone sources, and ecological zones unavailable along the coast. Cooper's Ferry sits at a strategic location where the Salmon River flows into the Snake, approximately 63 kilometers upstream from where the Snake joins the Columbia. This three-river confluence created what geographers call a travel node. Multiple waterways converging, access to different ecological zones within short distances. Salmon runs from 3 river systems passing through the same location during spawning season. The terrace where Davis excavated overlooks this confluence. From that elevated position, people could monitor river traffic, watch for salmon runs, and survey the surrounding landscape for game. The location wasn't chosen randomly. It represented generations of geographic knowledge, understanding where rivers met, which terraces remained above flood stage, where to position camps for maximum advantage. The Salmon River, rich with spawning fish every season, would have drawn these maritime peoples upstream repeatedly to this exact terrace. It offered everything a mobile group needed: permanent water, abundant salmon during seasonal runs, game animals including deer, elk, and megafauna in the surrounding hills, access to high-quality cryptocrystalline silicate for tool production. The 3,000-year occupation at Cooper's Ferry wasn't continuous habitation. The evidence suggests seasonal or periodic occupation. Groups returning to the same spot year after year, generation after generation, because it consistently provided critical resources. During salmon runs, families would gather to harvest and process fish. During winter months, when coastal storms made maritime travel dangerous, inland river valleys offered protected camps with access to game. During summer, groups might disperse to exploit different seasonal resources before returning, when conditions favored the site. This pattern of repeated occupation over millennia left distinct signatures in the archaeological record. The cached tools tell part of the story. You cache valuable implements in places you trust. places you know you'll return to. The formal pit features, deliberately excavated and filled, represent intentional activities, storing tools for future use, ritual deposits marking important locations, social practices reinforcing group identity and territorial claims. But they weren't just fishing. Scattered among the stone tools in the deepest deposits, Davis's team found 86 bone fragments, not from deer or elk, from an extinct species of Ice Age horse known as equus. This is the smoking gun. These megafauna remains were found in direct association with stone tools and hearths in undisturbed cultural layers. The inhabitants of Cooper's Ferry were hunting and butchering Ice Age animals that vanished at the end of the Pleistocene. You don't find extinct horse bones mixed with 16,000-year-old tools by accident. The faunal assemblage revealed more than just megafauna hunting. At the 2025 Texas A&M Conference presentation, titled Cooper's Ferry Nipehe, a keystone pre-Clovis site in the Americas, researchers noted that the site contains a diverse assemblage of faunal remains, showing that American Upper Paleolithic people hunted a wide range of animals, from late Pleistocene megafauna to much smaller prey. This resource diversity highlighted their adaptive strategies. They were not specialized megafauna hunters dependent on a single prey species. They were sophisticated foragers, able to exploit whatever resources the landscape provided. This is where DNA connects the archaeology to living people. In 2014, geneticist Eska Willerslev sequenced the complete genome of the Anzac child, an infant buried 12,600 years ago in Montana. The boy was interred with more than 100 Clovis tools and covered in red ochre. His DNA became the Rosetta Stone of Native American genetics. Willerslev's analysis revealed something remarkable. Roughly 80% of all present-day Native Americans, from Canada to Chile, are direct descendants of this boy's family. The Anzac child shared about one-third of his ancestry with a 24,000-year-old boy from Malta, Siberia, near Lake Baikal. The remainder came from ancestral East Asian populations. Groups from Siberia and East Asia had met and mixed before 25,000 years ago, creating a unique founding population. That population became isolated in Beringia for thousands of years, before finally expanding south. The critical genetic link came from another ancient individual, the spirit caveman from Nevada, who died 10,700 years ago. He was found with Western stemmed tradition tools, the exact same technology uncovered at Cooper's Ferry. Genetic analysis proved the spirit caveman was closely related to the Anzac child and to modern Native Americans. This connects every piece. The people who made the stemmed points at Cooper's Ferry 16,000 years ago were the direct ancestors of the Clovis people who appeared 3,000 years later. Clovis did not replace the first Americans. They evolved from them. The Western stem tradition was not evidence of a separate migration. It was the original technology of the founding population, moving down the Pacific coast and traveling upriver into the interior. The discoveries at Cooper's Ferry did not come without controversy. Several researchers suggested later dates for the finds, questioning the radiocarbon calibration methods. The argument centered on the scarcity of dendrochronological data for America during that period, which critics said limited the accuracy of radiocarbon calibration curves. Davis's response was direct and uncompromising. In published rebuttals, he noted the criticisms contained many factual errors, completely invented attributions, and poorly constructed arguments. The radiocarbon dates from Cooper's Ferry came from multiple independent laboratories. The Bayesian statistical analysis incorporated all available data. The stratigraphic context was unambiguous. The cultural features were sealed beneath undisturbed sediment. Every line of evidence converged on the same conclusion. The skepticism reflected a deeper tension within archaeology. For decades, the Clovis first model had dominated thinking about the peopling of the Americas. Any claim of pre-Clovis occupation faced extraordinary scrutiny. Dozens of proposed pre-Clovis sites had collapsed under examination when dating proved unreliable, or artifacts had migrated through disturbed sediment. But Cooper's Ferry was different. The assemblage was large, the stratigraphy was clear, the dates were consistent, the technology was diagnostic. The site represented repeated occupation over thousands of years, not a single ambiguous deposit. The most remarkable thing about Cooper's Ferry is not one spectacular radiocarbon date. It is the persistence. As Davis's team excavated deeper, they found evidence of repeated occupation spanning thousands of years, from 16,000 to 13,000 years ago. Multiple generations returned to this exact spot. They used the same terrace. They hunted the same animals. They cached tools in the same pits, bearing high-quality implements for future visits. The law of superposition, a fundamental principle of geology, tells us that in undisturbed layers, the oldest material is always at the bottom. At Cooper's Ferry, the deepest cultural deposits with stemmed points, hearths, and megafauna bones date to approximately 16,000 years ago. But the presence of fully formed hearths, sophisticated stone tools, and processed animal remains at that level suggests human activity almost certainly began even earlier. Some evidence points to initial occupation potentially approaching 16,500 to 17,000 years ago, making it one of the oldest confirmed human settlements in the Western Hemisphere. What happened at Cooper's Ferry after 13,000 years ago tells the second half of the story. The Western stemmed tradition didn't disappear, it evolved. Around 13,000 years ago, at this exact same location where people had been making stemmed points for 3,000 years, Clovis technology appears. The blade production continues. The stone selection continues. The overall approach to tool-making continues. The major innovation is in the projectile points. Someone figured out how to flute a point, removing a channel flake from each face of the base to create a thinner, more securely hafted weapon. That innovation spread across North America with remarkable speed, reaching from coast to coast in just a few centuries. But the innovation didn't come from Asia. It came from people who had been living in the Americas for thousands of years. People who had the time and knowledge to experiment with new techniques. Fluting might have offered advantages in hafting, allowing points to sit deeper and more securely in the shaft. Or it might have made replacing broken points easier, since the flute created a standardized base that fit into prepared shafts. Whatever the advantage, it was significant enough that the technology spread rapidly, defining what archaeologists now recognize as the Clovis culture. Cooper's Ferry destroys the ice-free corridor theory. The first Americans did not wait for ice to melt. They did not trudge through a desolate gap between glaciers. They were sophisticated maritime peoples who sailed down the Pacific coast, carrying stoneworking traditions from Japan and Northeast Asia, navigating rich kelp forests, and pushing up major river systems thousands of years before anyone thought possible. The story of the first Americans has fundamentally changed. It is no longer a tale of big game hunters stumbling across a land bridge. It is a story of exploration, innovation, and adaptation. These were people who built boats capable of navigating icy coastal waters, maritime cultures who spotted a massive river delta and followed it inland, a society sophisticated enough to cache valuable tools, and organized enough to return to the same camps generation after generation. Cooper's Ferry, with its cached stemmed points, its hearths that burned while ice sheets still loomed, and its fragments of extinct horses mixed with human tools, stands as definitive proof. When these maritime pioneers pushed up the Salmon River 16,000 years ago, they did not just pass through. They built fires, they cached tools, they hunted Ice Age megafauna, and they found a place worth calling home. If you enjoyed this video, click on the next video for more lost evidence.